Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmidt. So today I'm very excited about the topic. And I know you're probably going to say, Kristina, you're always excited about the topic. Well, that's a good thing because I like talking about it. But this one really hits home to me because I've seen through my career a transition in my thinking in this. And I want to start spreading that transition because it's so important for us to shift our perspective on something as important as this. And so what am I talking about? I'm talking about training and development. A lot of us have this perspective that we want to train our underperformers or the people not doing well. But I want to shift that for you today. And to kick us off, I'm going to tell a little story. It's something I've actually gotten from a sales training course I used to teach. So thank you to Wayne Van Wyck, who wrote that program and gave me this story. I love it. It's such an easy way to see something that we all do. So I'll start with that. So the animals in the forest, they decided because, it's a pretty competitive world out there, we're going to open a school. Then where we're better prepared for life and everything we need to face in it. So because the owl knows things, they made him the principal and they set their curriculum. And so their curriculum was running, jumping, climbing, swimming, flying, and burrowing. Sounds like all useful things that you might need in the forest or in nature in general, right? So they started their first week of school and everybody was enrolled in all the courses and they started working through it. So after the first week, the owl called the duck into the office and said, "Well, duck, got some good news and bad news. Well, your good news is you're terrific at swimming, flying, and your short stops on the small ponds are fantastic. But the bad news is you're terrible at running and climbing and burrowing. So what we're going to do for you to help you improve in these areas is we're going to have you spend 2 hours each every day on the climbing, the running, and 2 hours a week on burrowing. Okay, we're going to take you out of your flying and your swimming. And what's the other one? You're flying and swimming because we know you're good at those. So you don't need to practice those anymore. Okay, so all right, so the duck goes back and he spends his 2 hours a day on his skills where he's not any good. He loses all motivation. And by the end of the week, he's a school dropout. Sounds silly? Or does it sound real? How often have we said, I'm not going to do this thing that I know I'm good at, and I'm not going to practice it or I'm not going to work on it because I know I'm good at that already. I need to get better at this. I know I've done it myself, especially before I had language around the Working Genius. I was like, I need to be better at these things. So I need to spend more time doing it. It takes me longer. So I have to give myself more time to do it. I'll let this go because I'm okay at this already. And that's the wrong way to look at it. So people that know and have done a lot more research on this sort of thing, the Gallup industry. So I've got this book now, Discover Your Strengths. So if you haven't read it, it's a good read, nice perspective flip with lots of data and details in it. But they found in their research that it was hard to find any companies that didn't have these two beliefs held. And I'm going to read those for you. The first is that each person can learn to be competent in almost anything. And the second is that each person's greatest room for growth is in their areas of greatest weakness. So let's think about that for a second. It's not entirely untrue because when we think about, what the standard line, so let's say your line of standard is here and line of greatness is like way up here. And if it's a weakness, then it's way down low. So we do have a lot of room for improvement in theory. but it's a weakness. And by nature, we have God-given strengths. We have things that we're naturally good and gifted at, and things that bring us joy and energy. So those are our geniuses, to use my genius speak. And then those things that we're not so good at are typically frustrations. And the reason we're not good at them is because we weren't designed that way. So, in terms of looking as though there may be a huge room for improvement, there actually isn't, because sometimes we just aren't built that way. It's easy to see in terms of like an athlete, right? Some people, like, no one would ever claim I'm going to be a star basketball player. I'm 5 feet tall, right? So, I am not built that way. It's fine. I can do a lot of other things, and I'm good at many other things athletically, but I'm not going to be able to dunk ever, right? So for me to try to spend and work on trying to dunk on a 10-foot basket, probably not going to ever happen. Okay. And it's not worth my time and effort. Whereas somebody who is maybe 6'7" might be worth their time and effort and might have huge benefits. So now I'm going to read you the other perspective that Gallup wants to see everybody change over to. And I agree with them. And so this is the thing that I want you to change your perspective to. So the first one is each person's talents are enduring and unique. So enduring, like they're everywhere, they're unique to that person. Makes sense, right? We all have unique fingerprints. Every snowflake is different, right? So we're all unique. We all have our unique benefits. We all have our unique strengths. We all have our unique geniuses and frustrations. And the second thing is each person's greatest room for growth is in their area of greatest strengths. So again, let's think about that. Okay, so yes, it looks like we may have a huge room for growth when we talk about our weaknesses, but really, when we think of our capacity to grow in certain areas, we're naturally good at certain things. So our ceiling is so much higher. And to look at it another way, the benefits that we get from improving those things we're already good at and making them really, really good are huge. Because when you start getting really, really good at something, now you're like hands over fists better at it than everybody else. And you're going to get that much more impact. You're going to have that much more reach. You're going to have that much better result. Versus when it's a weakness, now you're bringing it up a little bit, but like you're still not as good as a lot of the people, and especially not as good as the people that it's their strength. So we want to start changing this perspective. All right, so the reason I'm passionate about this is because I have seen it in my own career where I have myself attempted to work on the things I'm not good at. Like when I was a plant manager, I wanted to there were so many like engineering things. Like I have an engineering degree, but I never engineered things, right? I did a lot of my work in operations and lean manufacturing. So I knew how processes ran. I knew enough to talk it, but I wouldn't walk it well, right? I would never want to design a product because I'm not good at that and I don't like doing it. So I wouldn't want to do it. And it wasn't worth it for me to gain such a deeper understanding. But in the work I was with the leaders I had, it was seen as a huge fault that I didn't have that. And I think I could have been served better had I played to my strengths, which were coaching and encouraging people and like that sort of thing, rather than trying to do the things I was poor at. So when we take that shift, so highly motivating for me because of my personal journey, but also because when I'm speaking to clients, so many times over, I hear, well, so-and-so is not doing so well, so we want to put him in your leadership course. That's scary. It's fantastic they want to help. But if somebody isn't performing well in their leadership role, we need to ask why. We need to understand what's going on before we throw them in a course. And it's really true for anything. If it's designing a product, if it's sales, we need to understand what's actually going on. Because by the nature of the fact that we're sticking them in a course, we're trying to say you don't have the skill. not necessary, and we're doing it, and we're doing it because they're not performing. So I'm going to reword that because it's coming out wrong, I think. But when we put someone in a course because they're underperforming, we're claiming they don't have the skill. But what they really need is they need the practice and they need encouragement. So if you go back to my delegation podcast, I go through the different styles of leadership that you need when people are learning something. So thinking through this as a learning curve, a person who's underperforming is likely in the they know it, but they can't do it stage. And what we need in that area is we need high support, right? We need direction still given, but we need high support. And sending somebody off to someone else for a training course isn't always giving them the proper high support. That trainer, I know myself, I give them high support as much as I can, but what they need is they need high support from their leader. So we need to rethink this, because think about it this way. So we've got this underperforming manager who we want to be grabbing hold of their team and doing more with it. So we want to stick them in a course. Okay, yeah, not going to work necessarily. But if we stick our manager who's doing well, their team is performing well, and we want them to hone in some skills, because holy cow, if their team is performing well now, what if they got really good at it? Then they could be on fire. All right. And then that is going to just stretch through the whole team and all the other teams that are there as well. So we want to stick those people in courses, and we want to see training as a reward and a way to hone in skills, not as a punishment for not doing well. Just to share another story, I was in an organization where the culture was you train the underperformers, and to need extra help was a failure. And so just imagine what that looks like. People don't raise their hand early enough, especially people who have something that in their own mind already where getting help is a failure, which a lot of us do. And now you're putting them in a culture where getting help means that they're not doing well. But really, if we're being great leaders and we're getting great results from our organization, we need to be giving help to everyone, especially our top performers, because our top performers are the ones who are going to take it farther. Absolutely, you need to help the team members that are struggling. But what we need more there is understanding about what's going on. So let's dig into what could be going on there. So if somebody's not performing well, it's typically either, like, to put it very simply, it's typically either a lack of skill or a lack of will. And the lack of skill, again, that is simple. That's something we can say, okay, well, if you haven't learned it yet, then we'll put you in a course to learn it. Or if it needs more honing in, we'll give you more opportunities to practice with support and with like a mentor maybe. But the lack of will can be hard, and it's not always about someone being lazy. And this is where I love to lean into the working geniuses, because when we can understand where someone's genius is and where their frustrations are, we can better understand and help them to understand that, oh, this just isn't cut out for you. And if it's something that you can just say, oh, actually, you're really good at all of this stuff. So on the team, we're going to have you take on more of this and others take on more of that. You can shift work around, because if they're still there, I'm hoping that they're a good fit for your organization. But it can also help you transition someone to an area maybe that you can't shift the work around, but you're going to help them transition to a spot that they're feeling, where they feel like they're contributing. Because I guarantee you, no one comes to work every day saying, I want to do a bad job. People want to do well. They want to feel productive. They want to contribute. And Gallup has proved it through their many research. Basically, people are empowered when they feel like they're contributing and using their strengths every day. That is like thousands of data points of research are saying this. And the best way to do that is to make sure that they're able to use those strengths in their work every single day. So just to help take this into from concept to real, I want to talk through some of the most common reasons that we develop and how we should be looking at that and breaking it down to figure out what our best solution is. So the first two I'm going to lump together because while they may sound different, they're actually quite similar. So it is this case of underperformance or not knowing a skill or needing a new skill. So this is basically you're not getting what you need. Okay. So the first thing we want to look at is we need to understand, okay, what are the geniuses and the strengths of this person? So let's take me, for example. So I have a podcast. I have a need to be able to upload it and put it out there, right? That's a skill. That is a skill I had to learn. So I learned just enough to get me by because when I looked at myself, I said, well, editing video and editing audio is not your strength. So I outsourced creating intros and outros for myself because not my strength, didn't want to do it, wasn't worth my time and money, or wasn't worth my time. So I spent money on it. And I quickly learned how to do very simple, simplistic editing. So that was a choice based on understanding my skill set and my need for that skill. Now, if I were to want to have more detailed editing happening or more video elements happening, I would not choose to learn that skill. I would choose to outsource that because it is not worth it. I have a lot of great ideas in my brain that would take me probably 2 weeks of editing and I would just quit doing it because I would hate doing it so much. So it's not worth my time. And so we want to take a look at that first. Like if somebody is underperforming, are we actually asking them to work in their competencies and frustrations all day long? Or is it that the skill is underdeveloped? So those are two things to look at. The third thing that is a bit deeper and takes more trust and empathy to get out of. So listen to my last 2 episodes if you need more details on there. But sometimes we are our own worst enemies and we get in our way. So when I talk about the will, this comes in there as well, that sometimes we have these wounds or these thoughts or programs that are in our mind from our childhood, really, that stop us from doing the thing. And we can start to work with our team members on that. So we want to understand what their thoughts are. And so some key things to be looking at are, when do they say I can't? When do they say I have to? When do they say I always? So for an example, it's like somebody struggles to give feedback. So you have a leader that reports to you and they struggle to give feedback. So if they say, I know I need to do it, I just can't. I struggle. I have a hard time. They know the words, but they just can't make themselves do it. There's probably a thought in there around what will happen when they give feedback. It's usually something around, people won't like them. And it sounds petty, but it goes deeper than that. And while that might sound scary to dig into some of that stuff, getting that sort of conversation out is going to grow the relationship, it's going to improve the person, and it's going to improve the results. So you can have these kinds of conversations without it getting too scary by just saying, okay, well, what are your thoughts around it? Well, why do you think you have those thoughts? And what thoughts would be beneficial? And, a thought that's a beneficial shift for that person is, I'm helping them by giving them this feedback. I'm hurting them by not telling them this because they're going to continue to make the mistake and others are going to look at them poorly and I'm going to look at them poorly and then we're all going to have to redo all the work. So you're actually helping them. It might take a lot of affirmations in your brain and repeating that and telling that subconscious part of your brain about that. But that isn't a training course. That is a coaching session that's needed. So remembering that around the underperforming, need a new skill sort of realm of development, We want to make sure that the skill is within the wheelhouse of that person. And we want to make sure that there's not just something behind it that's getting in their own way of just not using the skills that they have. So now let's move into the next one. And this is common and probably more common in large organizations. I have to pick something. Okay, so there's a lot of organizations that do annual reviews, which is excellent. And everybody on those annual reviews needs to have one development goal. Sounds reasonable, but that I have to do it can be rough. But it's actually not as bad as it sounds. So the idea behind the I have to is the same idea behind building a new habit. So when we build new habits, we force ourselves to do things and we practice those things. And that is such a key thing to start a growth process and to start to change how we behave. So it's a really good thing when we have that. The problem more lies in not remembering the intent behind it. So the intent being that, hey, we're all improving, and also we get in the habit of thinking about improving and remembering to improve. The problem is when we just throw people in random training courses to say, okay, we met our mark today. Okay, so remembering that development can happen through delegation, through coaching, through mentoring, through just taking on a project and the leader staying close to it, making sure they're learning the steps, and through courses. And now the last one is the one that I think we all want to get to, but we forget to get to, right? And it is wanting that slight edge. And this is where understanding our strengths and understanding our geniuses comes into play. So when we have a very clear view as to what we do well, as individuals, as teams, as organizations, and then we say we need to do it slightly better, that kind of an impact is giant. So when we can start to really hone all of that in for our whole team, and we say, we're going to pick this one thing and we're going to get really good at it because it's in our wheelhouse, it's what we do, and it's what we're good at, and it's the service we want to provide or whatever it is, now we can make a huge impact. Because as we talked about before, that developing of the strength, even 5% better, is going to make a bigger impact than raising that weakness up 5%. So that's where we want to get to, is where we're thinking about how can we just get that edge, because that's how we're going to be superb at what we do. Excellent customer service, excellent results, and really get somewhere. So while we're on the topic of training, I want to share that we have cohort number 2. So our next round of the Cornerstone framework course coming up, and it starts September 10th. So if you've been saying, gosh, I would love to hone in my message, I would love to get over some of those thoughts that are in my brain that are getting in my way, and I'd love to figure out how I can do this better and get my team working better together and get over some of my struggles with delegation and really just understand how to run my team well. Or if you're thinking about, hey, I need to be a leader, or I want to be promoted to a leader, this is a fantastic course for you. It is geared at Catholic leaders because there is so much benefit in merging our spiritual wellness into our work and our leadership and really just everything we do, and embracing that. So there is a Catholic swing to it, and we will talk a bit scripture and a bit about our wounds and how God will help us heal. But it's absolutely fantastic for anybody. In the last round, I had some non-Catholics, not practicing people in it, and they said, wow, this was huge. And I'm hoping some of them get back to Mass, but that's here nor there. But it is such a fantastic way to really get a jump on your leadership and how you're leading your organization. So I will leave some information on that linked below. So keep watching. on the podcast, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and I'll start giving more information about where you can sign up for that and what's included this time around. So if you want to check it out, it's kristinaschmidt.ca/cornerstone, and you can get a lot more information. I'll leave the links below. And next time you're thinking about training, re-listen to this podcast. Make sure that you're hitting those elements that make sense to develop your team and yourself. All right, until next time on the Business Building Blocks podcast, I'll see you then. Thank you for listening to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about all things people and organizational wellness, because quality people and processes are at the heart of every successful business. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you know when new episodes are released. You can also follow me on Instagram at kristinaschmidt.ca, where I share real-life tips to help in your leadership and life journey. To get one-on-one and team support with your leadership development, book a discovery call on my website at kristinaschmidt.ca. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.